let's talk about what's been going on YouTube, because YouTube would have you believe that we're about to get a Toyota Stout in the next few weeks and you should wait for it, and that we're going to get a Dodge Rampage and you should wait for it. And that's just not the case in either of those situations. Had a comment saying, tired of waiting for a Maverick, basically, well, we'll say screwing a star screw into a piece of wood. So, screw it. They're giving up. They're just going to get a Toyota Stout. Well, the Toyota Stout doesn't exist. But before we talk Toyota Stout, I'm going to let you be the boss. Do we talk Dodge Rampage or Toyota Stout? Which one are you more excited for?
Oh, that's a good question. I know Toyota has a great reputation, so maybe I'm more excited for the Toyota. But at the same time, I know that a lot of people love the SUV and the truck of the Ram, so it could be a great choice too.
And I've got a bombshell for the end of this episode, so do stay, because one of the most important things I didn't mention in last week's live about JD Power, whether it's a JD Power initial quality study or consumer reports, we're going to be talking about a major bombshell. Marie promised me she won't let me forget, but a huge point that needs to be considered with these reliability, scare surveys, which are actually going to scare a lot of people away from a new vehicle. So we've got to really talk about that. So you want to talk about the Toyota Stout first?
Yeah,
Fair.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we've got the Toyota Stout here, and like I said, YouTube's going to have you believe that this thing is available basically now. So I'm going to run a video in the background on the Toyota Stout here, and I'm going to do it without any sound, so I'm still here to talk to you all. We're not just watching someone else's video together. But this video goes on to basically say the Toyota Stout is happening. Now, the truth behind it is that this Toyota Stout might happen. Basically, the CEO said, yeah, that's definitely something that we're considering. Toyota heads are able to admit that the Toyota Stout might happen. But you really got to be careful here. And here's a great example of what you need to be careful for. And I've really got a big head tonight that's in the way. I'm going to slide over. No, you're beautiful. You look better than this truck, because this is, I'm not going to say a poor wrap up or a poor design. Howdy, John B. Meanstroke. Thank you very much for joining us. And Ridgeview, as always, thank you so much for taking care of everyone in the chat, keeping everyone, talking. And if you got any questions, just do your best to try to keep them for the end, folks. Now, the Toyota Stout that every channel's talking about, most channels talk like it's gonna happen, and a lot of titles say, wait for the Toyota Stout. The Toyota Stout is gonna blow the Maverick out of the water. That's because they know there's more people frustrated about the Toyota Maverick than satisfied with the Toyota Maverick. That's probably because there's maybe 2, 3, 4 million people that would like to at least be able to consider getting a Toyota Maverick. But I'd say for
Toyota Maverick?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Ford Maverick. This is a Toyota Maverick, by the way. And I'm going to say
side
why.
Of the Maverick is just the front that they changed.
Well, that's my punchline, and I'm happy you've stolen it from me, because when you're in a couple, there's no such thing as theft. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours.
Yeah, we see it's really the side of the Maverick with the little triangle there. The black one?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing here, folks. There's so much on YouTube saying, wait for the Toyota Stout, because there's a lot of frustration with the Ford Maverick. Why? Because I live it on a daily basis. For every one person that gets a Toyota Maverick, there's about 200 people, or maybe more, that would consider it. And there are 10, 15 phone calls or emails every single day being like, do you have one in stock? Do you have one in stock? Because most people, folks, don't want to order. And it's crazy, because I've been picking up these phone calls for the Toyota Ford Maverick for years now, a couple of years, And the same people, you start to be like, hey, I know this name. You go back in the system, you're like, oh, they called like 6 months ago. They called a year ago. They've been calling for 2 years. They could have had their
Without
Ford
ordering.
Maverick. They could have ordered two and had two by now from 2 years ago. But they don't give up. They don't let up. They keep calling. And, of course, as a professional, I have to do my best and encourage everyone else to also do their best to not pick up the phone with well, would you like to order one or would you like to never call us again? Because we're not going to have this for another 5 years. Because realistically, the Ford Maverick may very well not be, readily available in, reasonable numbers so that people get to pick their color and pick their trim and, like the good old days where you'd have maybe 100 F-150s and you pick the motor, you pick your equipment right from the lot. They almost always had what you want. And if not, they could get it from another lot. Well, we might still be 2 to 5 years out. I'd say really truly proper Ford Maverick supply, we're a couple years out easily. And I think we're 4 years out to have, we can say, a really enjoyable supply where you go and the vehicle you want is going to be at the dealership in the color you want. We're 4 or 5 years out from that. And we're probably still 2 years out from being able to be like, oh, well, my dealer has, 7, so they can find at another dealer and trade, and I can still get what I want. So basically, people have not been ordering this up. I can tell that the demand for the Ford Maverick, if they're building, let's say, roughly 100,000 units per year now, I'd say there's a whole lot more people. There's 4 or 5 times more people that need it, that want it now. And well, with the prices of these new full-size trucks, I'd say the market for the small truck segment and the mid-size truck segment still has place to double. And for political reasons, because of the CAFE rules and the 50 mile per gallon fleet average that's going to be required, otherwise they pay essentially taxes, companies need to sell less full-size trucks. And how are they going to sell less full-size trucks? By pricing certain people out of the market, by pricing them into a mid-size truck or pricing them into the small truck segment. That is the solution, folks. I don't expect, I came across a channel just today saying that new prices are going to be cut by 88%. It was right in their thumbnail. It was in the title. 88%.
That's a lot.
What? Honestly,
Impossible.
yeah, honestly, tell me what you really think.
No, if we cut it, it's a small amount. No, not 88%. It's impossible. Yeah.
At the end of the day, there's still a cost to these trucks. So the only thing that could ever happen is that maybe the price could go back to what it was in 2021, plus the production increase cost of maybe 10%. So in the new market, there's room for maybe 10, 12% decrease in price. And if that happens, you can also expect your trade-in to have probably dropped by 20, 30%. So I'd say the used market could potentially drop. If the market does drop, I think there's going to be a drop. It's a question of how much of a drop. But if the used market dropped by 30%, even 40%, no matter what, the new market can only drop by a certain percentage, 10, max 15%. And when I say drop, the problem is you're going to hear higher percentages if, of course, you're looking at the peak of when certain dealers across pretty much all manufacturers were charging over MSRP. But if we forget the over MSRP actual sales that were made and we just talk about the MSRP, that's the manufacturer's suggested retail price, that's the total price that the manufacturer puts on a sticker and puts onto the vehicle's window. So the window sticker prices have increased, but they can only decrease by about 10, max 15%, because there's a cost behind that. They're not going to start producing vehicles. They're not going to continue to produce a vehicle that they have to sell at lower than the cost of production. When that happens, they just produce very few or no of that vehicle, create a certain shortage, sell what's around and then decide, do we continue to make this vehicle, or do we say, hey, that was its last year, no more Ford Tauruses? That's how a vehicle goes, by. It goes out and doesn't get built anymore when you can't make a livable profit off of it. So Marie called it right here. First of all, the Toyota Stout is something very much not in existence. And currently, there's no guarantee of its existence. It's so not guaranteed that Toyota hasn't even given out a prototype yet. If Toyota had given out a prototype, Toyota invests more money and time than 10 minutes in Photoshop, because Marie called it, this is a Ford Maverick.
Yeah.
These are Ford Maverick handles. You see it back here, this back hood line. You got the A pillar, the B pillar, the C pillar. The C pillar, that is identical to, that is a Ford Maverick. It's copied. The back trunk, the bed, is a Maverick. The plastic on the top, Maverick. All they've done really is change the lights, the grill. They put on wheels, which surprisingly still look like Ford Maverick wheels. They look like what would be on a Ford model. Sorry, did I say Ford Maverick? These look like F-150 Lightning Pro model wheels. That's the Pro model, or the base XLT in the USA, which in Canada we don't get. We can't have these wheels, which I think they're pretty good. But anyways, those look like Lightning wheels off the base model. So a very quick Photoshop, the back bumper area. Marie, if you slide your head over.
Yeah, it's the same.
It's identical. You have a Maverick. We see it in our yard every day. We know that this is a Maverick, bottom plastic. Maverick all the way, folks.
And I guess it's too soon anyway to have pictures of the Toyota. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That is an excellent point. When we don't have a prototype out from Toyota, that means when the heads of Toyota say, we're considering it, and there's a good possibility. I'm paraphrasing, but basically they're saying, yeah, we're definitely considering that, because it's definitely a possibility, means it may or may not happen.
Yeah, but at the same time, I guess with what you said, that companies need to have smaller trucks now.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm sure they see the popularity of the Maverick, and they said, oh yes, we need to enter in that market. Of the smallest truck. And if they don't have a smaller truck and everybody else will have it, maybe they will be left alone. So they will need to do it.
Yeah, and Toyota might be forced to make a small truck, and that will actually relieve some of the demand on the Ford Maverick. And these are things that huge companies that don't want to go out of business after being in business for 100 years need to consider. Ford, when they're considering putting out a Ford Maverick, they said, well, how many people are going to buy this truck? Of course, they looked at Honda Ridgeline numbers. How many were they selling? About 30,000 a year. And everyone that is a truck, traditional truck guy makes fun of the Honda Ridgeline. Hey, look, that's Barbie's truck. Only losers drive it. Well, that's not the case. The Honda Ridgeline is fine and looks even better now that it looks less like Barbie's truck. So good job, Honda, on picking up on what the market was saying and changing the styling enough so it looks less like Barbie's truck. But the Ranger in 2019 had that, first initial bump up, but then numbers were coming down every single year. So at Ford, they were probably saying, well, our Ranger will probably be selling roughly about 60, 70, maybe 80,000 a year when we come out with a mid-model refresh. New model will probably get up to 100 to 140, depending on the success of the new styling and the powertrain options. And then they're looking over at the Tacoma and being like, okay, well, they sell 200,000 units, and they're doing that mostly on reputation because the 6-cylinder isn't very fuel efficient, and they just get it done. So, of course, every company that wants to build a mid-sized truck needs to figure out, okay, well, what's that secret sauce? How do you get a loyal fan base that's so loyal that even if the engine isn't that fuel efficient and costs you an extra $1,200 per year more in fuel than it really should, but then at the end of the day, you do, let's say $2,500 or $3,000 less in maintenance and repairs over 10 years. How do you convince people that they should just throw their money at that kind of math. And that, I think that really is the math behind a Toyota Tacoma. Under the V6 engine, we'll see what the new 4-cylinders do, but previously, you buy a Toyota Tacoma, you spend good money on it. They're not cheap trucks, but they're really reliable. First year or two of the 6-cylinder was a little problematic, but the fuel efficiency is horrible. Well, sorry, I won't say horrible, but if you're rough with it, yeah, you're getting 18 liters per 100 kilometers when you should be getting 12 out of that vehicle. So people truly were spending about, depending how many kilometers or miles they do in a year, anywhere from $600 to $1,800 more every single year in fuel. So if you have that truck for 10 years, $6,000 to $18,000 in extra fuel that if they had a more modern motor with turbos, let's say, a 4-cylinder with turbos, even if you did the turbo once and it cost you $2,000, even $3,000 in overall extra repairs, that's still a joke for all that fuel that you saved. Unfortunately, most auto reviews won't talk about that. Most auto reviews will just say, what are people talking about? You know, you don't want to go against the grain, you don't want to pet the cat backwards, and you don't want to upset your fan base. My goal isn't to, in this channel, it's not to make $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 a year with this channel and live off this channel. My goal with this channel is to tell the truth, even if it means petting the cat backwards. So sometimes I say things like, yeah, if you have a 2011 F-150 EcoBoost and you blow 2 turbos and it costs you $4,000 or $5,000 over your 300-mile life of the vehicle, you're still mathematically better off than if you would have gotten a 2011 5.7 liter V8 Hemi and spent an extra $1,000 every single year in fuel for 10 years. So I try to do it the math and I try to look at the data. And that's probably why you find me so annoying.
Because you're always calculating stuff.
Because I'm always calculating stuff. So...
But that's a good point of view. That's different.
That's why at the end of the day, there's money in the bank, because I'm always calculating. So this channel goes on to, really say that the Toyota Stout, it's coming, it's going to happen, and it's going to be better. It's going to be better than the Ford Maverick in 6 major ways. So by the way, this is a chase car. If you're looking over at Velocity for somehow they have a very, very similar video. So I wonder if the producer's the same person. I'd love it if their game and came on every week and showed their face on a live where people can laugh at them if they get things wrong, which I take that risk every single week. You guys, the internet can absolutely destroy me if I get one little thing wrong. And I'm not making any money off this. I make about $20 a video, so it is a joke how little money it is when you really try to cover the real deal, save people thousands, and make sure they don't get fooled. But I feel this video is fooling people, because how can you tell people, don't buy a Ford Maverick, don't go and order one, because, this is bad, and the Toyota Stout is going to fix everything the Ford Maverick got wrong. So the channel goes on to say, basically, and they show the Ford Maverick a lot. And of course, these days, if you're on YouTube and you say Ford Maverick a lot and you've got nice pretty pictures going in the background and you don't show your ugly face, that is the way to get 300 or 400,000 views. But that's besides the point. This video says that the Ford Maverick can't do off-road. And that upsets me. So that upsets me because I feel the Ford Maverick can do off-road. We had it here, and we had it on the really summer tires, and we drove through a snowstorm that was actually finishing off as an ice storm. So there was an ice layer, slick on everything, and we went up our mountain to get to our house. Well, up the mountain. It's what? It's about a kilometer going uphill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a kilometer going uphill. But it's a really steep hill. I've tried biking it, and I have to be in the first gear, otherwise I don't make it up to the top. And we can't run it.
You don't want to do that with the bike anyway.
You don't want to do it.
You're the only crazy who does that.
So they're saying the Ford Maverick is really, yeah, I'm crazy. I do it with a poodle strapped to my chest, but it gets people to wave and laugh. Now,
Mostly laugh.
they say that the Ford Maverick can't off-road.
For sure, it doesn't have a plate underneath to do the off-road, but I think it's able. Anyway, is there any smaller truck that is good for off-road if we compare?
Well, you can definitely get the Tremor model, and the Tremor, I suspect, will be good off-road because it's an inch higher. And they're saying that it's not a proper model, but they don't really explain why it's not a proper model for doing any off-roading. But somehow they're able to basically guarantee us that the Toyota Stout is going to be so much better for off-roading.
But can we do off-road with the Santa Cruz? With a smaller truck, it's not...
Well, it's unibody, but it's a solid unibody once there's a lot of rust. Like, these aren't going to be good off-roaders when they're 20 years old and filled with rust underneath, because rust definitely affects the rigidity and the structural integrity underneath the vehicle.
So you can break it.
Had this, had Velocity or Car Chase said, you know what, the Toyota Maverick long-term in salt conditions won't make a good off-roader, I'd say I agree. When you're 20 years down the road and there's holes underneath your vehicle because you didn't undercoat it, so get an undercoating. But if you didn't undercoat it and there's holes underneath and the sides are completely rusted out, well, it's unibody. So if your sides are rusted out and you've got holes everywhere, it's going to be pretty flippy-floppy and flimsy underneath. And if you're off-roading under some really hard conditions, you could twist or bend your unibody frame. I know that doesn't make sense to say frame and unibody in the same sentence, but your underneath of your vehicle, the plate, the one plate is essentially, that's your frame. So yes, long term, you can't have this like an old Jeep Cherokee or an F-150 or a Ram 1500 or a GMC that has a huge thick frame. When those get to be 20 years old and you've got rust on the frame is so thick, it takes so long to rust through. But one day you will be off-roading and you're just gonna, well, unless it's a relatively new Ram and you've put too much weight on it, those frames tend to go. And I say this jokingly, but there's a lot of photos. There's a lot of photo evidence of that. But, I'm going to leave it at that.
So what
everyone has their pros and
about
cons.
that, you can break any type of cars. If you off-road, maybe you will... it's a risk to take.
Well, long term, because of rust, even a full frame could bend and you could wreck your vehicle off-roading. But it's going to happen a lot sooner and under less loads, less weight, when you have a unibody. So it takes a little less rust, a little less holes on your unibody. You load it up with 4 really hefty people and you go off-roading in the forest, and that underneath is being forced under a lot of force, tension, torsional twist. Well, yes, it definitely could have catastrophic errors. So they say it's bad at off-roading, but that's not true. A lot of off-roading comes down to the weight of the vehicle, the clearance of the vehicle, and tires. And by clearance, I mean both height and, of course, front bumper and rear bumper clearance. And the Tremor has really good, very good. It has pretty darn good front clearance, and the back clearance isn't bad in any way whatsoever. So the Tremor is a vehicle you can definitely off-road with. For 99% of off-roaders, they'd be fine. It just wouldn't be the best vehicle for rock crawling. And long term, you don't want to be rock crawling with this when your underneath is starting to get, paper thin because of rust. Rust essentially slowly eats away at, picture if this was filled, if vehicles were made of bread and sugar and you left them outside. Well, ants will slowly eat away until there's nothing left. Well, that's what rust does. Rust is like hungry ants on bread. So...
Good comparison.
Horrible comparison, but I appreciate your loving support. Now...
That's imaginative. Is it a word in English? Yeah.
Imaginative, yes.
Okay.
So the channel goes on to also talk about, and this was another one of their episodes, they're talking about, what's going to come out for the 2024 Ford Maverick, and they're talking about, the Lightning and probably a FEV all-wheel drive, so a plug-in all-wheel drive. I really got to say that when it comes to the Maverick, when there's anything official, I will definitely say, hey, this is official. This is straight from the order guide. These are the new powertrains. I still think that, we could definitely get just a regular all-wheel drive hybrid before we get all-wheel drive plug-in, because there's an additional cost to that all-wheel drive plug-in. Just like the Lincoln Corsair, well, you need an extra drive unit in the back. You need an extra electric motor in the back, and demand is still very high. So the good news about these small trucks is if they do come out, well, demand will slack off the Ford Maverick, which when Ford planned this out, yes, they didn't guess the market right. But had they done too much and just come out straight up and built an all-new factory for the Ford Maverick, a huge factory, and say, hey, look, we can sell 500,000 of these. Let's build the factory in consequence. You spend a few $1 billion or several $1 billion. What happens if you sell 50,000? Somewhere the halfway mark between the Honda Ridgeline and the Ford Ranger. You just lost billions of dollars. And it's not like, Ford getting into the EV market, they had Tesla's numbers to look at and say, wow, people really love electric vehicles. And according to what people are spending over at Tesla, they're willing to spend more money to have an electric vehicle. So it seemed feasible. And also, they didn't announce right away that they're going to be opening Blue Oval City. They unveiled the Lightning, had several 100,000 orders come in, and then they're like, looks like we could have a huge factory building these. So Blue Oval City didn't just do it on a guess that they'd sell a lot of Lightnings. They already had the data saying we are going to sell a crazy amount of Lightnings. So they also go on to say that this thing is not, the Ford Maverick isn't reliable, and the Toyota Stout will be very reliable. And I'm going to call this the Toyota Maverick.
Don't know anything about this.
Because here's an extra piece of, I'm going to zoom in here. This is so much, I got out of it. That was so much a Maverick that they had Ford's PIN code. So at Ford, you have a code to get in. You put in your code and it'll unlock the doors, even if you don't have the keys on you. Well, that was Ford's patented PIN code to get into the vehicle, the keyless entry by code. So they're really going out on a limb for views here. I certainly would not wait on a Toyota Maverick, a Toyota Stout, because, they're still at the phase where Toyota hasn't put anything out, and all that we've got on the market is a photoshopped Maverick. Now, they go on to say that the Maverick isn't reliable. I wish there was a forced definition of reliability, and we're going to be talking about this because it does relate to the J.D. Power reliability studies. But the Ford Maverick, yes, it's had recalls, and it's got a few more. But, let me check on my phone here. I've got some that are entertainingly simple. Ford does recalls, for example. You've got one right here. You've got a full bulletin emissions recall. So we've got one here for certain 2020, 21, 22 Super Duty vehicles and medium-sized trucks with 6.7 liter engines. Reprogram powertrain control module, PCM, transmission control module, TCM. So to get better fuel, to be better with those, fuel EPA ratings, they want to do a reprogramming so that they can get a little closer to that 50 miles per gallon. And it's a recall. There's a recall for the Ford Bronco seatbelt buckle. And we'll talk about specific. We'll do a recalls only episode, part of this live. Right now we're still in is episode 2, because episode 1 was the market. Episode 2 here, we're talking about the Stout. But they go on to say that the Ford Maverick isn't reliable. And I have trouble with that, because I like the fact that when, if a company has 20 vehicles that don't want to start, they go, okay, everyone's covered. So basically, if they recall every single vehicle, that means anyone that has to have that fixed, if their vehicle doesn't start one time, but then does start later on, well, if you don't have a recall, what happens is the manufacturer will say, oh, it didn't start one time, the problem can't be recreated. Well, you're not covered. Manufacturers only fix things that are broken when it gets to their dealership. When it gets to the dealership and it's broken, then the manufacturer pays, unless there's a recall. If there's a recall, you go in and you say, hey, my vehicle doesn't start. They go into the computer system and they go, oh, your vehicle won't start. Well, we have an order, direct orders from Ford that they're going to pay us to go in, check, X part, maybe a wire, check it. And sometimes the recall is just if someone complains that their vehicle didn't want to start, even once, switch the wire right away. Well, you get a free wire. You don't have to go back and forth to dealership and say, oh, this morning it's not doing it. And you actually see when there isn't a recall, you'll have a vehicle come on the towing because it didn't start at their house, get put down in the yard, the mechanic will go in, start it right up, and then they go, but we right now we can't change any parts. Currently, there's nothing broken. Would you like us to keep your vehicle overnight and try it again tomorrow, and maybe under the same conditions as tomorrow morning? Then it won't start, and then we'll have a proof for the manufacturer, and then the manufacturer will pay us to fix whatever we find. But right now, your vehicle starts, so the computer is telling us everything is A-okay, no fix. How annoying is it if you go 10 times to the same dealer for the same problem? That's an intermittent problem, meaning a problem that happens every so often, and never when you actually bring it to the dealer, is most people's general experience. Well, when there's not a recall, you have to live with that BS. So I like recalls. I always think, it's a happy medium between having as many recalls as needed, but also aiming to you'll try to have none, but at the end of the day, you want to have as many recalls as possibly needed. So Toyota Stout here, they just go on and on. All it is a Ford Maverick. Likelihood that Toyota is going to build this. Toyota doesn't do new very well. They don't throw out a lot of new stuff. But I think the market is in such high demand for this. The Toyota Tundra does not make 50 miles per gallon. The new Tacoma, it's not going to make 50 miles per gallon, folks. It'll maybe miraculously get to 40 miles per gallon, but I highly doubt it. It's going to be somewhere in the 30 miles per gallon, likely, when it's the hybrid version. So Toyota Tacoma, I don't think, unless they put it all electric, I don't think that thing is ever making it to anywhere near 50 miles per gallon. We'll see where it turns out, but it's probably going to do about anywhere from 12 to 14, maybe 15 liters, maximum 15 liters per 100 kilometers. But I think the hybrid version in real world usage is going to be doing about 12 liters per 100 kilometers, which I think is about 26 to 30 miles per gallon. If someone has their phone on them, you just Google 12 liters per 100 kilometers in miles per gallon, and you will get the answer to that. So that was one of the videos I wanted to cover on the Stout, likelihood and when, because I promised to talk about likelihood and when. Well, the likelihood of when this is going to get produced, I'd say we're probably looking at, it's Toyota. They're going to be slow, so I'd say 2027. And I'd also say that the Stout probably is going to happen. I'd say 10 saying it's definitely happening, and 0 it's definitely not happening.
Is it sure?
I'd give it a 7.
Is it sure it will be that name, the Stout?
If they go with it, probably, yeah.
Probably,
if they
okay.
go. Well,
that's the only thing that
now
could be sure.
you worked at a Toyota dealership. Let me know. What do you think? Toyota Stout, what year will people actually get them in their driveways? Know. And what's the chances it's going to be produced?
I don't know. It always depends if they are, if they want to enter the competition quickly. Because Mavericks sell a lot, so I don't know. Maybe it will be faster than we think, but yeah.
The only way they could be faster is if they basically take an existing model, like a Camry, and turn it into a truck. That's the only way. If they, they'd have to use the same powertrain. Toyota hates new because they hate being unreliable, and they hate taking risks when it comes to reliability, because their entire brand is based on reliability. Not a whole lot of people are buying Toyotas because they think it's the sexiest vehicle on the market, or the sportiest vehicle on the market, or the most powerful vehicle on the market, or the most fuel efficient vehicle on the market. People buy Toyotas, folks, because they're reliable. So if the main reason that most people are buying Toyotas, if they can't make it happen on a model and it's a highly desirable model, what's going to happen? They're going to get hurt in sales across all their vehicles. It's going to hurt all their vehicles. If they come out, let's say next year with a Toyota Stout, real quick. Basically, let's say it's a Camry with a box. If they come out with a RAV4, sorry, let's say it's the platform of the Toyota RAV4, but in a truck, and they just use the powertrains from the RAV4, then yes, it would be reliable, and it could happen, but they'd be taking risks. You know, you can have reliability in regards to powertrains, but you can completely lose it out when it comes to suspension or electronics. So if it's actually pretty unique, I'd say it'd take them at least 5 years if it's a completely new and unique model with its own platform. And if it's a copy of powertrains and platform that already exist, it's going to take them at least 2 to 3 years to get into gear. At least. And that's why I'd say 27 in our driveways. Maybe in 2025 they will announce it, but I'd say 2026 the earliest, with a 7 out of 10 possibility that it's going to get made.